So, when you just look out a window, right, and you see a tree, there is this immediate, almost undeniable assumption that you're just, experiencing absolute
Oh,
reality.
totally. Yeah.
Like the leaves are green, the bark is rough, the wind is moving the branches,
Yeah.
your eyes are basically acting like a camera lens,
Right.
and you just naturally trust that this raw feed hitting your brain is the complete truth.
Well, I mean, it's the most intuitive assumption we make, right? We're literally biologically wired to trust that living, breathing, immediate sensation.
Right, but stepping into the world of formal logic just completely shatters that camera lens.
It really does.
Because the foundational texts we're looking at today for this deep dive, they argue that this immediate sensory experience, it isn't the whole picture at all. In fact, to truly understand the world, we have to construct a reality that is, like, completely invisible to our physical senses.
Yeah. We are talking about a massive cognitive leap here. Moving from just merely experiencing your environment to actually interpreting its hidden mechanics.
And that leap is exactly what we are focusing on today. So, welcome to the deep dive. We've got this dense, just fascinating stack of sources for you today.
Really incredible stuff. Classic academic texts.
Yeah, texts on formal logic, cognitive processes, argumentation. We are heavily grounding this discussion in the work of Gorski, specifically looking at the concept as a form of correct thinking, alongside other foundational thinkers like Strogovich and Vinogradov.
Right. Heavy hitters in the field of logic.
Exactly. And the mission for you today is to explore their central premise, which is what exactly is a concept? And I mean, not a concept like, oh, I have a rough concept for a sci-fi novel.
Right. No, not that kind of concept.
No, the concept as this highly specific, rigorously structured form of correct human thinking.
Yeah, because it is the absolute bedrock of logic. I mean, Gorski frames the concept not just as a piece of vocabulary, but really as the ultimate tool that lets us bypass the physical limitations of our own bodies.
Which is wild to think about.
It is.
And to understand how that tool works, the sources introduce this sort of thought experiment involving ants, frogs, and the human brain.
I love this part.
Right, because we have to start by asking why humans even developed the need for formal logic in the first place.
Yeah.
I mean, most creatures on Earth survive perfectly well without it.
They do just fine. Yeah.
So the texts divide the way we know reality into two distinct phases, and the first one is called living contemplation.
Right. And living contemplation is essentially just direct sensory perception. It's the immediate data streaming in from your sense organs.
Like touching a hot stove.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You touch a hot stove, you feel pain, you see an apple, you register its roundness and, its red color.
And for an ant or like a frog, that living contemplation is just the beginning and the end of reality.
That's all there is.
Right. Like an ant navigating a kitchen floor, it doesn't need abstract philosophy to find a crumb of bread,
No, definitely not.
Basic sensory information, like smelling a pheromone trail or sensing a physical barrier, registering a food source that is perfectly sufficient to organize its behavior and keep it alive.
Right. The ant is not pondering the chemical makeup of the sourdough bread.
Exactly. It just takes it.
It just takes it. And, the frog operates the exact same way. When a frog sees a fly buzz by, it isn't conceptualizing the fly as an insect belonging to a specific biological order.
It's just a snack.
Right. It simply registers a moving dark spot in its field of vision, and that triggers this purely biological reflex to strike with its tongue. The whole organism is perfectly adapted to live entirely within the boundaries of that immediate sensory data.
But human beings, and this is what the texts really point out, human beings are just inherently dissatisfied with just the given information.
We always want more.
We do. We have this relentless drive to understand phenomena that we can't actually see or touch or smell.
Yeah, like we want to understand the behavior of subatomic particles or map out the life cycle of entire galaxies.
Right, we obsess over the distant past, which is totally gone, and the far future, which hasn't even happened yet.
Exactly. Because you can't smell the Roman Empire. Right.
Right.
And you can't touch a black hole. Our senses just hit this hard biological wall.
Mm.
And when direct sensation reaches that limit, that is the exact moment where thinking becomes necessary.
Thinking with a capital T.
Exactly. In Gorski's framework, thinking is defined fundamentally as the search for new knowledge, when old memories and just basic sensory instincts fail us.
And the sources offer this really brilliant, simple example of this transition. Imagine you're walking through a forest and you smell smoke.
Okay.
Smelling the smoke is living contemplation. It's just sensory perception. Now, a deer smells that exact same smoke, and its instinctual reflex is simply to flee,
Run away.
run away. But a human smells the smoke, processes that sensory data, and makes a deduction, right? Like, oh, there must be a fire.
And that deduction is the crucial pivot point because you haven't seen the fire. You haven't felt the heat of it. But through mediated generalized cognition, through thinking, you have actually uncovered a hidden truth about reality. You've linked a sensory effect to an entirely unseen cause.
It's basically the difference between looking at a car's dashboard and actually understanding the engine.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
It's like seeing the speedometer needle move. That's living contemplation. But thinking is understanding the unseen combustion process under the hood that's forcing that needle to move.
Exactly.
But here's the thing. If we are constantly bombarded by, I don't know, millions of sensory details every single second, what exactly is formal logic doing to organize all that raw chaos into something useful?
Well, this is where Gorski draws a very, very sharp line between logic and other sciences. Because psychology, for instance, it studies the mechanics of how the brain works.
With emotions and stuff.
Yeah, the emotional states, individual quirks, how trauma affects memory, all of that. And sociology studies how humans operate in groups. But formal logic is exclusively the science of the laws and forms of correct thinking.
Correct thinking. So it's entirely focused on the scaffolding.
Completely. Formal logic strips away all the messy, real-world content of what you're actually thinking about.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it doesn't matter if you're thinking about the price of groceries or the orbit of Mars or the definition of justice. Logic only cares about the underlying structure that is holding those thoughts together. It evaluates whether the form of your reasoning is sound.
Okay, so if abstract thinking is the way we look under the hood of reality, then the concept is the specific wrench we use to do the work.
That's it. Yes.
It's the primary vehicle that makes that leap from sensory data to structural truth possible. And the texts define the concept as the first basic form of thinking, reflecting objects in their most general and essential features.
And the distinction they make here is so vital for you to understand. Formal logic draws a massive, heavily fortified boundary between a concept and a representation.
Right, representation, or in the original Russian text, представление.
Exactly. And in everyday conversation, we basically treat those words as synonyms. We say, oh, I have a concept for a painting, when what we actually mean is we have a representation.
A picture in our head.
Right.
Yeah.
In logic, they are entirely different mechanisms.
Yeah, so a representation is essentially an image stored in your memory. It's highly visual, it's deeply individual, and it's almost always blurry.
Yeah, it's subjective.
Right, like if I ask you to close your eyes and imagine a chair, you are going to picture a specific chair.
Probably the one I'm sitting in.
Exactly, or maybe the wooden dining chair you grew up with. But that mental picture is a representation.
But a concept has no picture attached to it. None. The texts are explicit that a concept is imageless. It is a universal, strictly defined set of boundaries.
The legal example from the source material illustrates this so perfectly. If I mention the word criminal, your brain instantly serves up a representation based on your unique life experiences, the media you consume, movies you've seen.
Yeah, I instantly picture a guy in a dark alley wearing a ski mask holding a crowbar.
Right. It's a very vivid, movie-like image.
But that visual is entirely subjective. I mean, if we relied on that specific representation to run an entire justice system, it would be a total disaster.
Work with chaos.
Because the legal concept of a crime looks absolutely nothing like a guy in a ski mask.
Right.
The concept is purely structural. It's defined merely as an unlawful action or inaction that causes societal harm.
There's absolutely zero visual data in that definition.
None.
So like a corporate executive who's manipulating numbers on a spreadsheet from a penthouse office, they fit the legal concept of a criminal perfectly.
Exactly.
Even though they look nothing like that blurry representation of a masked robber we have in our heads. So a representation is basically like a faded childhood photograph of your specific pet dog. But a concept is the strict taxonomic biological definition of the canine species.
That's a great way to put it.
But wait, there's a tension here, right? Because we aren't born with these highly structured biological or legal definitions just pre-installed in our brains.
No, we aren't.
So don't we fundamentally require those blurry visual representations to even begin building concepts in the first place?
Oh, we absolutely do, and the texts acknowledge that dependency. Strogovich and the other authors, They confirm that concepts must grow out of representations.
Okay.
Child has to encounter a bunch of different individual trees. They have to see the specific bark, touch the specific leaves before they can ever formulate the abstract, imageless concept of a tree.
Right, so the representation is basically the raw material.
Yes, the
Yeah.
raw material. But the cognitive leap happens when the concept outgrows the need for the picture.
Ah,
And that is exactly why Gorski considers the concept the highest product of the brain. Because a visual representation is permanently trapped inside your individual head.
I can't see your tree.
Right, I can't see the specific tree you're imagining, and you can't see mine. So if we only had representations, we could never truly communicate.
We'd just be isolated in our own little visual worlds.
Exactly. But a concept allows massive groups of people to share a universal, identical understanding of reality, completely independent of their subjective memories.
Wow.
It is literally the mechanism that allows humanity to build collective laws, construct scientific fields, and just maintain societies in general.
So to guarantee that this shared reality actually functions, we have to look really closely at how logic analyzes the internal architecture of a concept.
Yes, we do.
Because if a concept is the foundation of correct thinking, it has to be structurally sound. And the sources state that every concept contains two fundamental, inseparable properties, and those are content and volume.
Right. Think of these two properties as the load-bearing walls of any concept.
Okay.
So content refers to the essential features of the object. It's basically the rule book that dictates what makes a thing exactly what it is.
The rules.
Yeah. And volume refers to the actual class of objects in the real world that the concept covers, based on those rules.
So the geometric example they use makes this very tangible. Let's just look at the concept of a square.
Classic example.
Right. So the content of the square concept is its list of essential features. It must be a flat plane. It must be a closed shape. It must have 4 right angles, and it must have 4 sides of equal length.
Right.
That is the content. The volume, on the other hand, is the entire class of all squares that have ever existed, currently exist, or will ever exist anywhere in the universe.
Beautiful. And once you clearly establish the content and the volume, formal logic applies this diagnostic method developed by Gorski called formalization.
Formalization, okay.
Yeah. To rigorously test a concept and ensure it's logically sound, the logician temporarily removes all the real-world meaning and just replaces the elements of the thought with symbols.
Like math variables.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Usually letters like S, M, and P.
Yeah. The text described this by reducing a statement to the formula S, which is A. So S represents the domain or the volume, the class of things you're talking about. And A represents the logical form of its features, the content.
Right. But this method of stripping away the actual subject matter is often met with a lot of resistance.
I can imagine.
Yeah, because it feels deeply counterintuitive to take a passionate, real-world argument and just reduce it to algebraic letters.
Right. There is this natural skepticism there. Like, if you're listening and thinking, well, if we completely remove the actual stakes of a thought, whether we're talking about human rights or economics or, I don't know, just organizing a schedule, how does reducing life to S and P actually help us think better?
It feels cold.
Yeah, it feels like it just disconnects logic from reality entirely.
It seems disconnecting, yeah. But that abstraction is actually the only way to achieve bulletproof reasoning.
Really?
Yes. Because in reality, our arguments are heavily clouded by emotion and personal bias. We care deeply about the subject matter, and that blinds us to the underlying structure.
So it is essentially a stress test.
Exactly.
Okay, imagine engineers designing a suspension bridge, right? Before they ever pour concrete or hang steel cables over a river, they run the design through a computer simulation.
Right. And the simulation doesn't care what color the bridge is painted.
No.
Or what kind of cars will drive over it, or whether the bridge connects two beautiful historic cities. The simulation strips all of that context away and solely tests the physics of the load-bearing beams.
It just looks at the math.
Exactly. It reduces the bridge to pure mathematics to see if it will collapse under its own weight.
And that is exactly what Gorski's formalization does to human thought. It's the simulation.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, we can walk through a concrete example of how this stress test reveals hidden flaws. Let's take a really common flawed piece of reasoning.
Okay, let's hear it.
All birds fly. A penguin is a bird, therefore a penguin flies.
Okay, yeah. If we just listen to that casually, the rhythm of it sounds logical.
Right, it mimics the cadence of a truth.
It does.
But when we formalize it, we test the content against the volume. So the first premise sets a rule. The volume of S, which is birds, is entirely contained within the content of A, which is things that fly.
Right. But when we introduce the penguin, the structure collapses. The volume of S, the biological class of all birds, actually includes entities that do not possess the essential feature of A, which is flight.
Ah. So by stripping it down to just the relationship between the class and the feature, the structural failure is completely obvious.
It's undeniable.
Like, it doesn't matter how much you believe penguins should fly or how cute they are, the load-bearing walls of the thought are fundamentally broken.
Exactly. The stress test guarantees the process of thinking is flawless, regardless of the emotional weight of the topic. If the structure holds up when it's just variables, your thinking is formally correct.
And if it collapses.
Then your reasoning is flawed, even if your intentions are noble.
Wow. But there is a massive vulnerability here, isn't there?
What do you mean?
Well, because these purely structural, imageless concepts, they don't just stay in our heads as abstract formulas.
Right.
Like, to build those shared realities we talked about earlier, these concepts have to be transmitted from one brain to another, and they do that through language. Yes.
And the texts argue that relying on language introduces literally the single greatest danger to correct thinking.
It is the most precarious part of the entire human cognitive process.
Yeah.
The texts are incredibly strict about this distinction. Words and concepts are not the same thing.
Right.
A word is merely the linguistic shell of a concept. It's just the outer clothing the concept wears so it can be communicated out loud or, written on a page.
The word is just the delivery
It's
mechanism.
just the box it comes in.
Right. And the sources provide several proofs for this separation. The existence of synonyms is a really perfect starting point for this.
Oh, yeah.
Think about the words labor and work.
Right.
They spelled entirely differently, they sound completely different, but they point to the exact same underlying concept.
Exactly.
And if the word and the concept were identical, then synonyms would be logically impossible.
Right. You couldn't have two words for one thing. And you also have the reverse situation, which is words that express no concepts whatsoever.
Oh, really? Like what? Well, the texts point to interjections, like oh or ouch.
Okay.
Right. If you stub your toe and yell ouch, you are not expressing a rigorously defined imageless concept of physical trauma with specific boundaries of content and volume.
No, you're just in pain.
Right. You're simply vocalizing a reflex. There's absolutely no concept inside that linguistic shell.
And crucially, concepts don't even require words to exist in the real world.
No, they don't.
They can be transmitted perfectly through nonverbal signs, like a red octagonal stop sign at an intersection.
Perfect example.
It contains 0 spoken words, but it instantly and flawlessly communicates a highly specific concept about traffic laws, safety, and momentum. The concept is entirely independent of a vocalized word.
And because language is just a shell, communication is incredibly vulnerable to structural collapse.
Yeah, people misusing the shells.
Exactly. So to defend against this, the text insists that correct thinking must obey the foundational laws of logic. And the most critical of these is the law of identity.
The law of identity?
Yeah.
So this states that throughout a single thought process or, throughout a single debate, a concept must maintain the exact same meaning and point to the exact same object from beginning to end.
Yes.
You cannot allow the content or the volume to shift halfway through.
Right. And breaking the law of identity is the root cause of almost every endless, frustrating argument in society.
Oh, I bet.
It is the equivalent of sitting down to play chess.
Right.
And 3 moves in, your opponent decides their knight can now suddenly move like a queen.
Oh, that would be infuriating.
Right. The physical piece looks exactly the same. You are playing on the exact same board, but because they secretly altered the essential features, the concept of the knight, the underlying structure of the game, is totally destroyed.
Wow. And we see the structural collapse in everyday life all the time.
Oh, everywhere.
Okay, imagine 2 neighbors fiercely arguing over a proposed neighborhood rule about noise. They're just standing in a driveway screaming at each other, and they are both using the exact same linguistic shell. They are both yelling the word noise.
Right. But structurally, they're speaking 2 entirely different languages because they
Yeah.
haven't actually defined the concept.
Exactly. So neighbor A's concept of noise has a very specific content. Sounds that are loud enough to cause physical hearing damage.
Okay.
Therefore, their volume only includes things like jet engines or heavy construction equipment.
Very narrow volume.
Very narrow. But neighbor B's concept of noise has entirely different content. To them, noise is any sound that interrupts a baby's sleep. So their
Ah.
volume is much wider. It includes a lawnmower, a dog barking, or even just loud footsteps.
Yeah, so they are trapped in a completely useless debate.
Completely
They
useless.
think they're disagreeing on policy,
Hmm.
but they are actually just violating the law of identity. They're hurling the same linguistic shell back and forth, but they are operating with entirely different contents and volumes. And until they stop, strip away the word noise, and formally define the actual boundaries of the concept they're arguing about, correct thinking is just impossible.
It all comes back to Gorski's central premise, which is that logic isn't about what you are arguing, it is about how the argument is built.
Exactly.
Man, we have covered a tremendous amount of ground exploring this today.
We really have.
We've seen how human cognition relies on the concept as this amazing evolutionary tool. A strictly defined, imageless structure that allows us to bypass the physical limitations of the frog and the ant.
Right.
The concept is what lets us test the load-bearing walls of our ideas and actually build a shared functional reality.
And the practical application of this for you
Yeah.
as you're navigating the real world is incredibly powerful.
Oh, definitely.
The next time you find yourself stuck in a circular argument or you just feel overwhelmed by a media landscape that's specifically designed to trigger your emotions, you actually have a diagnostic tool now.
You do. You can pause the reaction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Strip away the linguistic shells and the blurry visual representations. Ask yourself, what is the actual content, the essential features of the concept being presented to me?
Right.
And what is its volume, the actual class of objects it really covers? Forcing yourself to define the boundaries of a concept is the absolute strongest defense you can deploy against poor reasoning, miscommunication, and deliberate manipulation.
You literally stop looking at the paint on the bridge and you start examining the physics of the steel.
I love that. Yes.
Which leaves us with a final thought to consider, building on everything we've unpacked today.
Okay.
So the texts establish that concepts are the accumulated result of human practice, right? They are the painstakingly built, shared realities we use to survive.
Right. Built over generations.
But we now live in a digital ecosystem where algorithms increasingly curate the information we consume, and they subtly shift the definitions of words based purely on engagement metrics.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So, if algorithmic sorting begins to quietly redefine the content and volume of our most important concepts without us even noticing, whose reality are those concepts actually reflecting, yours or the machine's?
Wow. That is a really profound question about the future of how we structure truth.
It really is something to carefully test the next time you find yourself endlessly scrolling. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of thought. We will see you next time.